Well, I finally met a woman who was way more freaky than me. Yeah, she was. She wanna do it in the morning, afternoon, and in the evening, we freaking. She love to get it on. Yeah, I had to sleep with one eye open. But this woman won't leave me alone. No, she won't. I had to sleep with one eye open, yeah. But this woman won't leave me alone. No, she won't. All she wanna do is make love.
All right. We're back. We're back again with another Star Studded episode on the Chatterbox with King Jacob. And welcome to the Fruitful Fridays. And it's thank God it's Friday for everybody, and hope everybody's gonna have a great weekend. And most of all, be safe, stay encouraged. And you know, man, we have a whew, when I say Star Studded, when I say creative, when I say man, just inspirational. Man, listen. When I just got a brief understanding of who she was and how special her creative gift is and her creative writing, I just say yes. Let's bring it on. So, without further ado, I definitely let the guest of the evening introduce herself. You have the floor.
Hey everyone, my name is Markia Ashley. Thank you so much, King Jacob, for having me on tonight. I definitely appreciate you.
Okay. So we'll get right into it. When people want to know who you are, you know, when they say who is Markia Ashley, what type of answer is that? Is that a loaded answer?
I feel like that's a loaded answer. But so again, my name is Markia Ashley. I'm actually from New Brunswick, New Jersey. But I live in Atlanta. I love the South. I'm an author. I have a book called Spiritual Suicide: The Dangers of Not Knowing Who You Are. Um, I'm a believer. I'm a woman of God, and I am just a creative being. I'm just out here creating, trusting God.
Okay. So with that being said, um, spiritual suicide, people not knowing who they are, you know, the the concept is such a loaded, mind blowing concept, and so as you was, getting it together and writing this, what was that process like? Was it emotional, mental, spiritual process? Like, can we talk about your process?
Yeah, so it was all of the above. Actually, I started just. I've always been a writer. I used to always write in my journals, my Care Bear journals. These kids probably don't know what a Care Bear is, but I was always writing, and it started off me just writing my struggles and talking to God. To be honest with you, it wasn't even supposed to be a book. Well, I believe it probably was supposed to be a book, but in my mind, I was just writing down my process, my struggles, and everything that I was going through. I went through a really deep depression. Just a little bit about me, though, just so people can kind of understand why I wrote this book. I grew up very insecure. I felt unwanted. Um, I just didn't know my worth and my value, and I didn't know who I was. And as I was growing up as a young lady, that's like key stuff. When you get into dating world and you're dealing with men and stuff, like you don't even know who you are. If you don't know who you are, this world will eat you up alive. So you have to have a source where, like who are you? You have to have standards, you have to have morals and all that stuff. And I didn't have any of that. I didn't know who I was. And the person that I seen in the mirror, I hated myself. I wanted to actually be someone else my whole life. My whole life I wanted to be someone else. I seen myself by my failures. I grew up, my childhood was dark, to be honest, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate with that. My mother was a young mom. My mother was a mother before she was a woman. My father was a father before he was a man. They were finding out who they were. They were teenage children having babies. So I basically grew up with my parents, like when they learned something, I learned it, but I felt very unwanted, and a lot of things in my life transpired. I was sexually abused. My mother struggled with drugs coming up, domestic violence. I used to see my mother get beat on, which is a lot for a young girl to see. So all these things caused me to have a really bad self-image of myself, and I'd seen myself as like damaged goods. I seen myself by my failures, my mother's failures. I just felt like I had no value. No, like if I died, I probably was like, yeah, I'd rather just die, because I didn't even see any value in my life. And so I grew up very just insecure. And as I got older, as a young woman, I realized that I need to start loving who I was, because I can't be nobody else.
Hmm.
It's always going to be a woman with more money, more smarter, but you better start learning who you are and loving yourself, flaws and all. So that's what I started doing. I started to recreate a healthier self-image of myself. And honestly, how I did that was I started getting to know my creator. I feel like, you know, we're a product. And when something's wrong with the product, you have to go to the manufacturer. A product can't help itself. And so I had to go to God. I started getting into my word, and I started learning what God said about me. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm pretty dope. And I started
Right,
looking
right,
at myself the way God viewed me, and stopped listening to all the lies the enemy was telling me. And, because the enemy will try to remind you of your dirt, your shame, and keep you in that and keep you isolated so that you don't know who you are. So that was kind of the breakout for me. Once I started getting into my word and learning what God said about me, whoo, God started showing me my value, my worth. And even though now I had this new knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, I still was battling, because knowledge really is just information. Wisdom is actually walking in that, activating the knowledge. So I had all this good information, but I still was struggling to apply it.
right.
God was saying I was beautiful, but it was sometimes I wasn't really seeing what he's seen at each, every season changes. So I was around a lot of successful people, and I wasn't really as successful as I wanted. And it just put me into a depression. I was comparing myself a lot, which opens the door to depression. Um, I was just ungrateful, comparing, and it just put me in a very dark space. So what I did was I fasted for 22 days. I broke it down though in two parts, because ain't nobody Jesus, like I can't do 22 days. But I did the first 11 days just water, the second half fruits and vegetables and everything, and I started writing. I was wrapping myself in a word, and I started writing, and that's how this book came across. And what I was doing was I was actually surrounded by a lot of successful people. I'm talking about millionaires, dudes and women who got money, and I was working and struggling at this 9 to 5. And I got to the job, and I was clocking it. Like when it turned 5, I'm like, oh, is it 5 o'clock? You know what I'm saying? Like I literally got the job so I can pay my bills. And so I was grateful for the job, but then I got so content in just paying my bills. Like, because
Hmm.
I came from a season of really not having. So now I'm grateful to have, but I forgot the purpose of it. Like I was just going to work now, and I was just paying my bills. So I was stuck in this gray area of, I got to pay my bills, but I got greatness in me though. So I noticed it was on some Jay-Z, like, this can't be life. It got to be more. Like, I know I wasn't created just to
Hmm.
be paying these bills, because I'm not fulfilled. I'm empty. My bills are paid, but I feel empty. So I started speaking about spiritual suicide. And one day, that's what my spirit said. It was like, you're committing spiritual suicide. You're doing all this meaningless things, and you're not, to me, spiritual suicide is self-destruction when you're living outside of God's will. So that's when I started writing this, and it came alive.
Okay, okay. So we have a couple people tapping in. Shout out to my brother Samuel Pugh out of Columbia, South Carolina, the chosen one TV network in association with Fox. Shout out to him, and shout out to my boy, Red Boys side, in the studio with the Red Boys, which is a dynamic podcast that interviews up and coming talent, some of the remarkable backstories of some of the most influential artists that we hear today. So shout out to both of them. Now, I want to step back for a minute,
Okay.
and you know, you really spoke on how depression hits you and it hits you hard. So, how did you kind of realize that you was depressed, and what 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 made you depressed?
I would say my constant negative thoughts. It's like I didn't see no sun around me. I seen dark. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like there's a difference between someone who's miserable and someone who's full of joy. The similarities is their thoughts. They're was what they're dwelling on. So the person who's
Mhm.
full of joy, they're most likely dwelling on positive stuff. And the person who's miserable, they're most likely dwelling on negative things. And to be honest, I had to sit back and do some thought inventory. You know, our mindset is a battlefield. And I realized that I was just dwelling on everything negative. I was like a pessimist. Like, I would, I walk in a room in a beautiful house and I'm looking at the negative. Ooh, I don't like that wallpaper. Or, ugh. Just being ungrateful, being negative. And I feel like that was a door for depression to come in my life. To be honest with you, I was dwelling on all negative. I did not see good in nothing. I was angry. I was mad. I was ungrateful. And I also was comparing my life. So that all those things are doorways to depression.
Oh wow, oh wow. So when it comes to you facing it, you going through it, you coming out of it. What is that testimony like when you really share that with people?
You said me coming out of it.
Yes, and so what is your testimony like when you kind of really talk about depression and when you share it with people, and when you mentor other people, like what is that testimony like for you?
So for the testimony for me is I you have to stop viewing yourself by your current season. Seasons change, tables turn. Winter it never stays winter. It's always spring after that. Spring, summer, fall. So I feel like we judge ourselves and we judge other people off the season that they're in. And I did that a lot. So I stopped looking at myself as this victim. To be honest, I came up out that victim mentality, the pity party. I was not doing pity parties no more. I started speaking life into myself, even when I didn't feel like it. Because sometimes you got to do stuff you don't feel like. You know what I'm saying? So I
Right.
would do things intentionally. Like, I would wake up, get in my word, set a schedule for myself. I started juicing. I started exercising. I was in my word so much. I was putting pray. I switched it. Like, instead of putting rap music on and all this other stuff that was feeding my flesh, I was putting praise worship music on. So I started feeding more so my spirit. We have to understand that we're human beings. That means there's two parts of ourselves. There's a flesh and there's a spirit. And life is spiritual. We can't keep feeding our flesh and think our spirit man is going to be tall and strong. We have to start feeding to our spirit. So I started actually tapping into my spirituality in Christ. And I started feeding my spirit and I started watching what I said about myself, even jokingly. Sometimes we put word curses over ourselves and we think it's a joke. I mean, I'm to the point where I remember my friend was saying, "Oh, let's do this." I'm like, "Girl, I'm broke." That's a word curse. Now I started switching it and I'm like, well, I just
Right.
ain't got it right now. You know what I'm saying? So I
Right.
started changing my mindset, which started changing my behavior and my vocabulary. And I started changing things around me. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't doing the old things that I would normally do. I started doing new things so I can see new changes in my life.
Okay, great. So we gonna take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with you know, one of the most dynamic people on earth. You know, author, creative writer, public figure, and most of all, the child of God. So stay tuned for more important messages. We'll be right back.
Shout out to the men that just came home from jail and said, no matter what the circumstances is, I'm never going back. Shout out to the men that said, I'm tired of neglecting my children. I'm stepping up and being a man for my children, teaching them morals, honor, responsibility. Shout out to the men that say, you know what, I'm tired of sleeping on that couch. I'm tired of using my mother. I'm tired of using that girl. I'm going to step up and be a man for me. Shout out to the men that just graduated from college or going to college. Shout out to the men that graduated from trade school. Shout out to the men that say, yo, I'm just tired of being tired and I need to make a change. Shout out to the men that stayed there, that's raising their children. Shout out to the men that's getting married or want to stay married. Shout out to the men that's taking care of children that's not biologically theirs. Shout out to the men that's trying to figure it out. Shout out to the men because you are a beautiful soul. Shout out to the men that's just being a part of everybody's life to make a change, man. Stop the violence.
Shout out to the men who are standing up, doing what they're supposed to do, is trying to make a change in the world and society and navigate through this journey of life. Try to inspire people and brothers, we need each other and our sisters need us too. So you know, we have to unify, unite, and just walk together and stand together as one. So shout out to everybody that's definitely got some positive going on and people who are taking a stand to really show the children a better way. So shout out to everybody. So spiritual suicide.
Yeah.
Break that title down. It's like uh, I was just thinking about this earlier today. I was like, she uh she said something that because you hear people say spiritual growth, spiritual awakening, spiritual awareness, but you said spiritual suicide. So I got to kind of get on the level of your thinking, to really see how you embodied that whole, you know, uh, uh, writing expo. You know what I mean? Because it ain't just something anybody just can pick up and write. You know what I mean? You got to really be a deep thinker and you have to have gone through some things and God has to have delivered you from some things to write about something like spiritual suicide. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, so spiritual suicide is about taking accountability, you know? I mean, we can't point fingers our whole life and blame our parents for every single thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, our childhood is a foundation for our adulthood, of course. But at a certain time, you're going to have to look in the mirror, you're going to have to take accountability. And that's what I did. I realized that where I was in my life, I can only blame myself. I was a grown woman doing what I wanted to do. And I just took accountability and I realized that I was on a road of self-destruction. I was doing a whole bunch of meaningless things. I'm sure you heard the saying of you're just out here existing and not living.
Right.
And spiritual suicide is that. I met people who are dead spiritually, like they're just dead, and I was one of them. There's zombies out here. And where it comes from is that when you're outside of God's will and you're living in ignorance. So the title was spiritual suicide, the dangers of not knowing who you are. So that means that if you don't know who you are committing spiritual suicide. Now, Hosea 4:6, the word says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And that's one of my favorite scriptures because it speaks so much volumes. The world will have us thinking that ignorance is bliss and what we don't know can't hurt us. However, that verse, my people perish for lack of knowledge, shows us that What we don't know can hurt us. What we don't know can hinder us. What we don't know can destroy us. How is it that we can walk in our purpose and we don't even know who we are? It doesn't even work that way. I've met a woman who was like 65 the other day, and she told me straight up. She's like, I'm finally taking accountability. I don't know my purpose. And it hit me because I'm like, wow, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a lot of us out here. We just out here living. I mean, not even living, but just existing. We just outside. Like, some of us just outside with no purpose. You know what I'm saying? And I was waking up every day. I was scrolling on Instagram and doing meaningless things. You know what I'm saying? So when you're just doing a whole bunch of nothing, you're most likely committing spiritual suicide. You're not walking your purpose. And to me, when you are walking your purpose, you are activating your spiritual gifts, whatever God put in you. Okay. And how you can identify your gift is if it serves others, if it blesses you, and it glorifies God all at the same time. So if I have something that you need and I don't give it to you, I am robbing you. And I realized that I was robbing so many people because I wasn't walking in my purpose. So I had to change that. And that's what spiritual suicide is. It's living a life with no meaning. You're empty, and it's self-destruction.
Wow. My. Wow. Man, she said self-destruction. And you said that, you know, you can't live in your purpose if you don't know who you are. And in order to live in your purpose, you got to have some type of understanding of who you are. And the only one who can make you understand who you are is God. And so
Yeah.
if you don't have that relationship with God, that personal relationship, as they would say, as
Yeah.
my dad would say, son, get you a personal relationship with God. I can tell you a lot of stuff, but uh, God already got it in alignment for you to do certain things that I may not even understand. And I'm your father, so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times what God has for somebody, you know, nobody will ever know but God and that individual.
Yeah.
And so
And he tells us that we're made in his image. So
mhm,
that means we have to know him in order to know what we even look like,
right,
you
right.
know? So the key is connecting with the source. I feel like I went through a season where I was, watching Oprah and all these self-help books, and it had me on a path to thinking that I'm my own God. And that was a very dangerous path for me because I'm not God. I didn't wake me up this morning, okay? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? I didn't create the stars and the moon and the sun. Like, there's no way I should be walking around thinking I'm God. I'm not God at all. But that's how, these self-help books and stuff will have you thinking. So I had to really corner myself. I had to put every book down and actually get in the main book, the Word of God. That's the only way. There's like no shortcut. And I'm telling you, I've tried to take probably every shortcut there is, and it always took me back to, girl, get in your word, sit down, close off the noise in the world, and get to know what God says about you. And that was the key for me, is to know what God says. I think we live in a world where it's like, oh, walk in your truth, walk in your truth. No, you need to walk in the truth, not your truth, because your truth may be false. You may be deceived, highly deceived, because that's what deception is. Deception is
Ooh.
it's a lie, but you think it's the truth. That is deception. And a lot of us are walking around deceived. That's why we have to get in the truth and not our truth.
Mm, 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 mm. Get in the truth is not our truth.
Oh yeah.
But that's a that's a whole different type of book. That's a whole different type of book. And now with this book, I say to myself now, listen, because I've been in this music industry for the entertainment industry rather for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and so I talk to film directors and screen playwrights and stuff all the time, and we have conversations. That I asked them, I said, man, we definitely need more faith-based film on the big screen. And so, and I said, man, I gave you a name. I said, man, um, this this author, this queen has a book called Spiritual Suicide. And he's like, what? I was like, he's like, what you mean by that, man? I was like, we gonna find out tonight. I was like, well, listen. I said, but listen, man, just off the title alone is pretty mind blowing. It makes you think. And I said, man, I could really see her doing a stage play, a TV series, and a movie. You know what I mean? And I was like, because that's it's so needed right now. Like, because you got to ask yourself with the times that we living in spiritually, where are people really spiritually? And I asked one of my homeboys. I said, man, do you think that people are spiritually yoked? He said, what that mean? I said, so if you're a man of God and you say you about to get married, you got to ask yourself, do she love God more than she ever could love you?
Mm.
And if you can't answer that question, then there's a problem. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Mm.
And so, you know, and can she pique your spiritual interest? You know what I mean? Does she move you spiritually, mentally, emotionally? You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
how how does that particular person, whether it's a man, with a woman, or whether is vice versa. Like, do that person take you to a higher level? Like, did she did he or she teach you something about the word? Do Did they make you understand how powerful the relationship can be if the word is included in the relationship? So it's a lot of things spiritually that people got to think about, and I believe a lot of times that when people are married, they're spiritually suicidal. You know what I mean? Because if if I don't know you spiritually, and we haven't talked about these things, we haven't talked about, what happened in your household.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what did you see?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see anything in church that gave you church trauma?
Yep.
Like these are things that need to be talked about before you say I do to someone.
Mm-hmm.
So and so, um, I do believe couples can be spiritually suicidal. You know what I mean?
And piggybacking off what you said, so okay, I'm single, right? And my pull drops down the more and more I have standards, the more and more I want to honor God.
Mhm.
Because nowadays men say I want a woman of God, but they don't want a woman who's celibate, or they want a woman of God, but they want a woman who sin a little bit, fornicate a little bit, and they trying to compromise. And so the more and more I go deeper in Christ, the less the less my percentages of dating or finding that person, it drops, because a lot of people are like, yeah. I don't know about all that. I appreciate you, but I don't know if I can hang with you until we get married, or so it's certain standards I see that it makes my pull drop of dating. But I also think it's easier for me to determine who's who, because people gonna show me if they in it or they not. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And one thing the spirit showed me was, that scripture, Proverbs He who finds a wife finds a good thing and finds favor upon the Lord. But I've read that scripture so many times, to be honest with you. But it was not until this year that I read it differently. You know, your mind has to be renewed. When you start reading the word more, your mind gets renewed. So that means that that thing that you used to read and understand it in a certain way, you're going to read it differently. You know what I'm saying? You're going to see it
Right.
differently. So I went back over that and I noticed that it says, he who finds a wife. So that means that when a man goes to search for his wife, that woman, ladies, and it's for y'all, you got to be a wife before the ring comes. You have to be the wife. You have to be that wife before the ring comes, because that scripture said, "He who finds a wife." Notice it says it. Notice that it doesn't say he who finds a woman. That means that that woman already has the characteristics of a wife before you say "I do."
Ooh, have mercy.
That means that you're faithful already. You're responsible. You taking accountability already. You know what I mean? Already. That means that it's done before. It's existing already. So that's what draws a man to a woman and want marriage, because he sees the wife in her before he gave her the ring. And so for me, I'm not waiting for my husband. I'm preparing for my husband. And I think it's two different action words. You know what I'm saying? First of all, I know he's coming. So I'm working on myself and I am building my wife characteristics before he comes, so that he sees the wife in me before the ring comes.
Hey, I can't be mad with that. All I can say all I can say is salute on that. So, y'all heard her. You got to prepare yourself. You know what I mean? She ain't said get ready the day of. She said you have to prepare yourself, and sometimes it takes years to prepare yourself. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, cause you're cause you're going through these growing pains, and you're trying to find yourself spiritually. So therefore, it takes years for you to do that. But
Yeah.
once
And,
you
and
understand,
a ring doesn't magically transform you into a wife. Just because you got a ring, that it doesn't just magically transform you. You have to be that already. Already. Before that man comes, you have to be that already.
wow, you know what, you know what. Oh boy, listen. We're gonna be right back in a few minutes, y'all don't change y'all down, cause it's more to come.
Do you know how many people are jealous of you? And they got no idea that the gift you have, you never prayed for. Y'all ain't saying nothing to me. The gift that you hold, you never asked God to give it to you. And you got folk that are fighting you, and they don't know, I don't even want this. God done put it on my life. All I can do is flow in my gift. You know you're authentically anointed when people who got more than you don't like you. And you're trying to figure out why you attacking me when I ain't got nothing. I hope y'all tap this church. God said, if they hate you at this level, what they gonna do when I elevate you to a whole nother place? This is just the beginning.
Hey. You heard my brother Jamal Brown. He said, you authentically know when people don't know you, don't like you, or they got more than you, they don't like you. Why you bothering me? I ain't got nothing. Listen, listen, man. He said this is just the beginning. Like when God proceeds to elevate you, and you understand that God is embracing your journey and guiding your footsteps, then it's gonna be people that have something to say,
Mhm.
and the things they have to say, you might think that that person would have never said that. I've been knowing this person for 20 years, 25 years. I never heard him say nothing like that.
Mm.
But hey, when God is working on you, and he's working on you internally and externally,
Mhm.
You know what I mean? People don't understand, but it's not for them to understand because it's not their journey. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So you know, so I just tell you that you just keep going and keep your faith strong and keep writing because you know you writing is so therapeutic, but a lot of writers have to really understand that when you're in your creative process and you're putting literature inside a journal, inside a book, inside a novel, and people can see that in black and white, it helps them stay inspired. And they
Mhm.
always be looking for more from that writer, from that author. So, you know, this is a wonderful thing that you did. And you did something that I haven't heard been done. You, man, you talk about spiritual suicide, man. Listen, man. Like, we need to set you down with some pastors and let's talk about it on a live
Yeah.
panel discussion. A live panel discussion because it's needed. You know, it's like everything that we have going on, you know, inside the church and outside the church, you know, there's definitely gonna be lessons in your blessings. And
Yes.
so I definitely understand that, you know, with all the lessons that you learned, that creative writing that you have is gonna help bless somebody else. Keep going, my sister. Keep going,
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
no doubt. So now the book is out now, and
Yeah. Amazon.
when you right, so when you kind of really talk to people like like on in chats and prayer lines and stuff like that, what are some of the biggest questions that you're asked about your book?
I actually was on a prayer call before here, and one young lady said she wants to know how she wanted to know how I kept going. I think that she battles with the fight, which we all do. You know, we hear it all. It's so easier said than done. Whereas
Right,
keep going, keep going. It's so easy to say that, but when you're in it, when you're in the storm, that rain feel heavy on you. You know what I'm saying? And it's sometimes you just give up on yourself. And I told her that's why we can't lean on our own understanding and we can't pull from our own strength. We are too weak. We're too weak and we're too ignorant sometimes. We gotta lean again. It's always gonna circle back to the creator. Hey, I told y'all, it's no issue in life where it's just going to be you. We're not our own God, you know. We have a source. So what I told her was that you pull from him. He's going to guide you. And what that's what he did with me. Do you know how many times I gave up? I gave up, like, I would say 10 different times. And I'm being honest with you. 10 different times because I started listening to negative things in my mind. Girl, just give up. Girl, what you doing? Who's even told you can write a book? Who you think you are? You know what I'm saying? Writing a book, you know? And,
right,
you know, the enemy kept reminding me of my past. And that's what happens because he know. See, the thing is, the enemy knows that promise. Spiritually, we all have like a star above us. And see, what the enemy does is he tries to steal that star, bury that star, sell that star, or transfer that star. But we have to be aware of it. We all are called. We all have gifts in us. You know what I'm saying? But if we
right,
don't even, if it's like, if again, like if we don't even know our destiny, how are we gonna fight for something if we don't even know? Like, if I feel like, if I wake up every day and I feel like I don't have no purpose, it's going to be easy for me to give up because I feel like I'm not worthy of nothing. I don't have no purpose. I literally just got to go to work, pay my bills, come home, scroll on Instagram, that's it. So be careful of your everyday activities because the enemy is going to try to distract you, and the enemy is not picky. He don't care what you're doing, just as long as you not in your word, getting to know who you are and who you belong to. So the key is to gain so much knowledge that you have something to fight back when the enemy tells you to give up. When he tell you not going to be able to do it. You can't do this. You're not going to be able to do that. Well, the word says that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So you got to have that fight back. But if you don't know your word, then you're going to get slaughtered out here. Because the enemy is very clever and he is distracting us. I mean, look at social media. It's, I mean, it's so, you know what I'm saying? Like, I thank God I didn't grow up as a child with social media. Oh my goodness, I would be done for it. And he, I mean, he distracts us with movie. If you look at like your, I don't know how many people got cable, but if you go on Direct TV and you see how many channels, like, why is it this many channels, bruh? Like, why are we? It's like 1,000 and plus channels. To me, it's like, oh, he's really
Yeah.
trying to make sure that we doing everything else but getting to know who we are. So that's
Mhm.
the key. Don't give up. It don't matter what you're going through. Do it when you don't feel like it. And don't always depend on you feeling like it. Feelings are flaky as hell. I mean, some days I feel like it. Sometimes I feel like I'm so strong I can shout out from the mountaintop. And some days I feel very low. So I can't go off feelings. And that's what Satan wants us to do. He wants to go off our flaky feelings because that feelings are located in our flesh. And being in our feelings is the worst and the most dangerous place to be.
Very dangerous.
Yes.
Very dangerous.
Make
Very
some dumb
dangerous.
decisions in your feelings.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I had a hashtag that I used to say. I said it for years. Get out of your feelings and get into your healing.
Ooh, I love that. I
Yeah,
love that so much. And that's true. Our blessing is actually located outside our comfort zone. So everything don't always got to feel good to you.
you're right.
Sometimes go ahead, I'm sorry.
You're absolutely right. And see, that comfort zone will keep you stagnated.
Ooh,
That comfort zone will keep you spiritually complacent.
yep.
Because a person can be spiritually complacent as well.
Oh, all day spiritually handicapped and stuck on the bench. You on a bench. You ain't in the game. You the water boy
Yeah,
spiritually.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, with that being said, man, you got to always try to go to different levels when it comes to spiritually, because not only you may need healing, but you might have friends you go with that need healing. You might have family members that need healing, and it's people that you gonna meet in everyday life while you on the journey passing that's gonna need. So people got to be able to say, I don't know her or I don't know him, man, but their spirit is just all that. I just the next time I see him, I'm just gonna stop him and talk with him. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
people can see your daily walk, your daily purpose, and your daily journey from afar. And it really makes them feel good that somebody out here, that I can really talk to, that can potentially give me some answers, but not only that, but just can make me feel good about myself as a person. And
And to
so,
know that you're not alone. I think when I was in depression, that's what I kept thinking, that I'm the only one going through this. You know what I'm saying? But we're not alone. And I think when we speak to other people and we fellowship, we start understanding, wow, I'm not the only one who's going through this. I'm not the only one who went through that. You know what I'm saying? So we have to understand that we are not alone out here. And go ahead and speak. And I'm telling you, your purpose is not even about you. You just being used
right,
as a vessel. Your purpose is about someone else. When Christ died on that cross, he didn't do it for him. He did it for us.
that's right.
So our
You're
purpose
right.
is not about us. It's about somebody else who needs you, need what you
You're right.
have inside of you.
You're right.
That's why if you keep it to yourself, you're robbing someone of their blessing, of their healing, of their freedom.
And it's funny you say that. You know, the good book says, "Why would a man rob God?" But people always think that it's resulting into monetary. It's not.
Oh no.
Why
Mm-mm.
would a man rob God? Why would you rob God? So God gave you a blessing, but He didn't give you that blessing to keep to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not sharing those blessings, you're robbing God. You know what I mean? Um, when you
Amen.
when you when you when they say, man, I can just live from the fruits of my labors. That
Yeah.
don't mean you. that that's not taken lightly. The fruits of your labor is like how you treat people. Do you love people as God loved you? You
Mm-hmm.
know, can you bite your tongue enough to really see what's going on with a person? And once you see what's going on with them, can you interact with them to give them some type of spiritual word so they can
Mm-hmm.
really see, oh, he or she didn't even come at me foul. They just were so
Mm-hmm.
calm and so manable, so manable. That means a lot to people, especially when people are dealing with grief. You know, grief is the thing that nobody really understands. Nobody don't like it, but if the wrong person says something to that person that's grieving, it can bring a character defect out of somebody that people never know who that person was.
Mm. Mm. Yes. And see, grief, I had to deal with some grief a lot in my life. And there's a time for everything. There's a time to cry, it's a time to laugh, it's a time to be sad. And I went, you remember when Moses passed away in the Bible?
Right.
God allowed them to grieve, but then he was
Hmm.
like, all right, like, what's next? Because I'm still God. That's the
That's right.
thing. You know what I'm saying? We forget that God is still on the throne. Our circumstances don't change who he is.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So there's a time to do all that stuff. I think grieving and mourning, that's important. We have to get it out. We have to heal from it, but it's important not to stay there. It's important not to stay in places that no longer serve us. So we have
That's
to evaluate our environment. We got to do thought inventory on what we thinking about. And when we're building something, we might need to build in silence because there's dream killers out here. You know what I'm saying? And also, a lot of people are not going to see what God, because God gave you the vision. It was only you and
that's
God
right.
on that conference call. Nobody else was. So they didn't hear what God told you. So we can't expect other people to see what God only put in us. You know what I'm saying? And when things happen, I was in a situation where my dog died. I had lost my job. It was all this. I was dealing with family stuff. And I was sitting so long that my spirit said, okay, time to get up now. Time to get up now. Like, acknowledge the situation, but don't stay there too long. And I think what happens is we all stay in places way too long, and it takes over our life, it takes over our mind, and it hinders our destiny.
You're right. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right about that. It definitely hinders our destiny, and it definitely you'll feel like your feet is placed in some cement and you can't move. So
Yep.
you definitely got to stay prayed up, and you
Mhm.
and you and you definitely got to understand who God is, and He can bring you out of anything. So
Yeah.
with that being said,
You might not know how, but you need to know who.
that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. You might not know how, but you need to know who. That's what's up. So,
Mhm.
um, you know, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise with us and sharing your journey with us. And
Thank you.
I want to, as before we close out, I want you to tell people where they can find your book at, where they can find you at, and what you got up and coming, for the rest of 2025.
Yes, so well, thank you again, King Jacob. First of all, I love your name. I think it's so dope. It's so much power in your name.
Thank you. Thank you.
But my book is on Amazon. You could put spiritual suicide and Markia Ashley. It'll pop up. You can follow me on Instagram at Markia Ashley, which is MarkiaAshley. And what you'll see from me is me finally walking in my purpose. I'm going to be more proactive. I'm not going to stop talking about what God has done for me. I'm going to be on panels, podcasts, interviews. I am actually walking in my purpose, walking in my promised land. I don't just want to see my promised land. I want to walk in that thing. So y'all going to see me walking, gliding in it this year, all year long, and next year, and just for years to come. I'm here now.
All right, you heard it first. We chat about from King Jacob. I'm your host, King Jacob, and none other than the dynamic author, creative, and public figure. You know,
Thank you.
listen. So drop that gem one more time of who you are, where they can find your book, because I don't want them to miss it at all.
Yes, Markia Ashley. I'm on IG at Markia Ashley, MarkiaAshley, and you can find Spiritual Suicide on Amazon.com.
All right, you heard it first. Markia Ashley, Amazon.com. Peace and blessings. We out of here.